And are you back with me, Gerald?
I sure am, buddy. How do you hear me?
Oh, I hear you loud and clear. Wow, this is incredible stuff, Gerald. We're getting into some really deep details. Enki's going to make an appearance here, Enlil as well. I love this analogy. Lord of the earth, Lord of the air, and how this all fits in with the dweller of Unal. Just jump in there, Gerald. Let's go for it.
Okay. Well, in this tablet, the dweller of Unal, Thoth introduces us to this heritage that leads up to the dweller of Atlantis, that goes through, and he calls him an Atlantean king, whose lineage comes through Suntal. And I made him a little mistake in the book. I thought he was talking about Suntal being the Atlantean king, so a little correction there. He calls himself the master of Unal, and he's an avatar, just like the other avatars we talked about in the last tablet, that could occupy the bodies of men. His name is Horlet, and he's declared to be the Lord of the Earth in Atlantis' day. So I heard that, I was like, wait a second. Lord of the Earth, En means Lord, and Ki is the Sumerian word for Earth. So Enki means Lord of the Earth. And that was his title before his half-brother showed up, Enlil, who means Lord, En.lil means Lord of the Air. So he didn't arrive for another 5,000 years after Enki was here and was already the Lord of the Earth. So this, in my opinion, was the beginning. If it didn't already go back to Nibiru before, it was the beginning of a major functional overlapping between those two that caused this battle for the title of Lord of the Earth. And that, by the way, is rank 50 on the Anunnaki Council. And Enki's rank at one point in history prior to 3760 was 40, and Enlil's was 50. So he actually was the Lord of the Air, but he also was taking over the Lord of the Earth. That's why Enki got pushed out to be the Lord of the Waters, right?
Wow. This sounds like something out of a Star Wars movie, Gerald. Lord of the Earth, Battle for the Earth, Lord of the Year, Lord of Scott.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I know. So, and you know, eventually through my writings, I started stacking them into the Enkiite and Enlilite camp, because oftentimes these disparities occurred even among their children over whether they were in the right place in the zodiacal house to assert themselves as the new zodiacal ruler. And this brought into my whole theory about the ping-ponging back and forth between the Enkyites and the Enlilites, and the extent to which the zodiacal house was their term limits, which, you know, brings us to right now and changing over from Pisces to Aquarius. Mm-hmm. We're the first degree of Aquarius from my calculations. And that means it's Anunnaki council change time. So all these perturbations you're seeing in the simulator, the wars and everything else, this happens between the power changes, when, especially when it's going from an Enkiite or an Enlilite who's bent on destruction to a more benevolent ruler like one of the kids of Enki or Enki himself, that, you know, wants the best for mankind, wants them to evolve, wants them to wake up in the simulator. And, you know, you're going to see that in this tablet, that, you know, Thoth is, and he said it at the end of the last tablet, you know, he viewed himself as the freer of mankind out of bondage of the illusion of Ka. So, so they feel like, so he felt like he was an intercessor. And as far as I'm concerned, the fact that he stepped up, could have taken many other paths, and decided to do that for us, that makes him a hero in my book.
Wow. Just think, astrological houses, you know, clashes or interactions and stuff like that, but think of it on a grand scale for the change of zodiacal ages. Just think of that on a grand scale. It's the play.
Well, this Horlet guy is amazing. I'll tell you a few of his attributes. And I personally think it's an avatar of Enki himself, because there was only one god in the Atlantean temple, and that was Enki, or Poseidon, who was Enki. So this Horlet shows up, according to the story, early when the Atlanteans were first coming to power. And he brought them the knowledge and wisdom and how to get their souls on the pathway back to their light source, because he explained to them they were from this this sun, soul, spirit, just like we are. And Horlet is described as beyond Earth cycle. He wasn't from Earth, and he was claimed to have never been one with the children of men, although he was living in a body as a man among them as an avatar. So that's kind of trippy right there.
Wow.
Right? So this Horlet guy chooses 3 disciples on Atlantis to train for 15 years as light bearers and teachers to the rest of mankind. And they live on this island of Unal. And actually, one place it's spelled Unal, and the other place it's spelled Undal. And I got a little confused in my book. I don't know which is the right one. So Horlet, this master Horlet, has the power of what's called Yolton, Lytolan. Now, this is the power to manifest matter with his mind that we were talking about in the light encoding reality of the matrix rules. Okay? And I'm dying to share that, but I'm going to hold it out as a teaser. Okay? But if you study those rules, you could have the power of Yolton. That's what he's telling you here. Okay? So this guy is pretty powerful. And he chooses these 3 disciples, trains them for 15 years, sticks them out on this island, and then he segregates Atlantis into 10 sections with 10 rulers. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, wait a second, where have I seen that before? And I'm going to jump forward just a little bit from the text, from the Critias dialogue.
Oh, yeah, Plato.
Yeah, where Plato is talking about how Atlantis is segregated, that there were some kingly actors on this Atlantean stage that came out of my other book. So we know that Poseidon and Enki had 5 pairs of sons, 10 total, who became the kings and rulers of Atlantis. And the eldest one was Atlas, the son of Poseidon and Cleito. Okay, so basically what that comes down to is these offspring, because Cleito was a primitive worker. She was not Anunnaki bloodline. So these offspring are demigods, and in the tablets, Horlet apparently segregates Atlantis into 10 sections with 10 rulers, and he describes them as being ruled by the children of men. So these offspring of Enki with Cleito actually are, closer to men than they are to Anunnaki. So I thought that was interesting that those two correlated, those stories. Okay? So this Horlet builds his own temple, and he describes it as mile upon mile, you'll hear this in the reading later, of buildings, using this mind power of Yolton that he has to create material forms, both animate and inanimate, but primarily focused on the cities and the dwellings that he's building with his mind. So that's kind of amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, well, this shows up as something that apparently, if Thoth gets taught this ability to do this, don't you think his dad probably had it as well?
Oh, there's a lineage. There's definitely a lineage.
Yeah. So, when he handed off the Caduceus to him, he probably taught him everything he knew, just like he taught the Adapa a significant amount of knowledge. Now, don't go looking for therapy, okay? I'm bringing up Adapa again. He was taught a lot. He was taught a lot of knowledge, too, so much so that he was able to interact with, according to the story,
poor little
the wind,
Adapa.
the simulator, and start it and stop it. So that's pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah, in terms of Adapa, I think, like I say, I think again, this incarnation scenario and humankind, I think it wasn't just as simple as tweaking us to exactly what they want us as slaves. Yes, that was probably an element of what they were doing, but I think, well, there's a playoff. You can't say we want to give you the consciousness and we want to do all this as the role, or you can't say I only want to do this slave species to go and mine the goods. I think you're doing both together, whether you like it or not. It's a full package, And
well, actually, I think there was a clever piece of that, because I'm sure that they faced that problem. They said, how can we give them intelligence and memory such that they're doing these particular tasks, they're going to remember what they did. So, eventually with reflective consciousness and memory, you're going to go, well, comparing and contrasting, hey, we're enslaved, and they'd figure it out. So this is where the key of these latent circuits comes in.
Latency.
To slowly allow the being to wake up out of their state of illusion to the point where incrementally they got ready for the big aha and break the God spell and realize, hey, I've been enslaved all along. And I think a lot of people are waking up to the external reality of their enslavement in society, but it goes much deeper than that.
Putting those triggers in, though, Gerald, unless there's something like a galactic trigger like we talked about, I mean, let's say there's symbolism, for example, and I know Thoths was into a symbolism. Let's say symbolism is a reactive mechanism to help you. And look how much symbolism's in our world. Our world runs on symbolism now.
If you add, and I actually got an article from Dr. Richard Allen Miller, who was friends with Timothy Leary and had exposure to these 8 circuits that he actually called parallel dimensions. He viewed them as various dimensions of reality as we change consciousness as these circuits are activated, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Wow.
But these circuits, as you recall, some of them were sensitive to various things, and the archetypes was one, the symbolism was another one. And if you go back in your life, you can probably see at the points where you were exposed to those kind of things and see if it had a different effect on your path. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the Atlantis story echoing inside the Emerald Tablets. It's there's parallels there, you know?
Say that one more time.
There's parallels of the Atlantis story inside the Emerald Tablets. It's parallel there.
Well, parallel, I mean, the guy is calling himself Thoth the Atlantean. And here in this tablet, he talks about what went wrong on Atlantis, precisely what went wrong, and then what was done about it. So, the mystery about how Atlantis was covered by the waves and all, he tells you exactly here. So, it's like one of those things, he said in a previous tablet, hey, 36,000 years ago, right before I went to the halls of Amenti, I built the lion body on the top with my face, and I built a Giza pyramid to commemorate the entrance to my underground halls of Amenti. Now, I've showed you on the Zodiac that it agrees with that. A couple other people have as well. Mm-hmm. But we still don't believe it. Why? I mean, here's the author who's talking in first-person account. This isn't somebody writing about it hundreds of years later like we have in the New Testament and such. This is the first-person account from the being named Thoth, who we know as Ningshita, who did our genetic upgrade. Now, you either dismiss it or you believe what he's telling you. And when I read this the first time, it was so science fictional, I had trouble getting my head around it, really. Sure. And I wasn't really at the point where I truly understood who Thoth was. I hadn't connected him to the Sumerian story with Ningshita, who was Enki's Poseidon's son. So then when I read this, it started to make a lot more sense. Yeah. And it makes more sense every time I read it, actually.
I did a show on Ed Malkowski is his name. He has a book, Ancient Egypt, 39,000 BC. The History, Technology, and Philosophy of Civilization X. You got to read that, Gerald. It's
actually, I watched the show that you did with him, but I have not read his stuff.
Well,
so all of a sudden here he is saying, hey, Egypt on 39,000. Well, that falls perfectly within the time when Thoth says he left Atlantis, which was 50,000 years ago, and went to the land of Egypt, ruled for 16,000 years. So it completely envelops the 39,000 year time marker that he's talking about. Mm-hmm. I think it's correct.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So there's some other kind of neat things that come out of this tablet. This Horlet being, first they call him Horlet, and then he starts referring to him as the dweller of Unal. And he's calling him the dweller because he's occupying this temple, okay? Now remember, there's these 3 light beings that he's trained also that are living on the island of Unal. Well, it gets confusing to me whether the temple that he's in is the same as the one that Thoth gets initiated in a little bit later. So I have to look at it a few more times. But Thoth is summoned by one of these three teachers of Horlitz to come and meet him in the temple. And he's going to give him a special function as one of the children of light, and also a keeper of the records of wisdom. And he's to be used as an instrument to preserve the Atlantean wisdom through the ages. So, we're not just skirting around the idea of Atlantis. He's talking directly about, this is where I was born, and this is what was going on there, and here's what was going down relative to the people that were running the place. And I'm having first-hand interaction with them because I'm royalty, basically.
Wow.
Why else would he be having this kind of liberty to have interaction with these high-level priests or beings that are from another dimension in the temple? That could only be because he's the son of the Poseidon himself. And so this is kind of a crazy theory of mine, but I know that Atlantis was ruled by Poseidon, and we know what his temple was like, that he had 10 kids, and they became the ruler, just like this document says. So, ultimately, what that means to me is that I think Horlit is an avatar of Enki.
Mm.
And so he's also called the Dweller of Unal, okay? So that's really an important name that comes up in a little while.
5 sets of twins, 10 kids, 5 sets of twins, yeah?
Yeah. And it matches exactly with the 10 divisions that Horlit did here. So, anyway, so Thoth dwelt in this temple at Atlantis, studying until he says he became one with the light. Okay? And he basically, even prior to that, he refers to himself as a master of cycles. After, I guess, leaving his body and learning about all the different planetary wobbles and cycles that fit together, I guess he did this in order to make sense of the encounter he has later in the halls of Amenti. And so he says he blasted an underground tunnel where the Sphinx is now to the halls of Amenti so that he could have access to this portal area where the Flower of Life was. And apparently they had access to it from where Atlantis is into this underground area as well. So it must have been a massive underground tunnel.
How big do you think underneath the Sphinx this place is, Gerald? How big?
Well, one of the specials I looked at from a guy named Dr. Jim Hertog, who says he had access to the Silas radar data that was gathered under the Egyptian president for about 30 years. He says he has access to this, indicating that the size of the halls of Amenti and whatever surrounds it, this underground city below the Giza Pyramid, and the Sphinx is so large it fills the entire Nile Valley.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it must be a massive cave system, Gerald. Natural cave system.
Well, I think they had underground capabilities of digging very vast spaces using their technology that made it quite easy.
Mm.
Yeah. So anyway, so Thoth says he did that, blasted a space in an underground tunnel to enable him to go to the halls of Amenti. You remember earlier he's saying he had to go there every 100 years out of 1,000, expose himself to the Flower of Life, and that rejuvenates his body.
Mm.
And also,
I have to jump in there, Gerald. I actually have a video on Capricorn TV. It's about drilling underneath the paws of the Sphinx by Zahi Hawass. It's rare footage that's been in the archive, and I have it on a YouTube video. But I covered this story. But Edgar Casey basically predicted something underneath the paws of the Sphinx, a chamber.
Yeah. Well, it gets better than that. Later in the tablet here, and you'll see it when he reads it, he talks about, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but he talks about burying a spaceship underneath the Sphinx.
Wow.
his spacecraft.
Wait for this, Gerald. Wait for this. Okay, so does it? Casey has.
Wait for that. But so the next thing that we get into now, Thoth has been traveling out of his body all over the galaxy and the cosmos, learning about all the rules of planets and evolution and consciousness and all that stuff. And then he gets brought back to Atlantis, summoned by one of the three disciples of the Dweller, brought into the temple, and then he gets, he gets exposed to the idea that these elite beings that are seeking higher knowledge. These are the people who got prideful and arrogant on Atlantis. Okay, they got rich and they got prideful and base, according to Plato.
Oh wow.
Okay. Yeah. So when this happened, they were seeking even higher knowledge, and these elite, and they opened a dark portal that was forbidden to man. So apparently they were reaching out through some portal to another being to get more knowledge than what they thought they were getting on Atlantis. That's the bottom line. Well, according to Thoth, about this time, this dweller of Atlantis, or Unal, is, as an avatar, is sleeping in this container that he calls an Agwanti chamber. Okay? Well, just because he's in there doesn't mean he's not aware, and he's apparently out roaming the area as an avatar, keeping an eye on everything, right? That's what he's doing. And he says he detects these guys opening this portal, this dark portal that was forbidden. And immediately when he discovered this, he headed back to his body, and then entered the halls of Amente, where the Lords of the Nine Cycles. Remember, only number 3 through 7 is there. There's 7 of them. But they call them the Lords of the Nine Cycles. Well, he approaches them, has counsel with them, and then tells them and coordinates with them to change the angular momentum and spin rate of the Earth suddenly, such that the waves that are generated by this sudden stoppage overrun the area where they've opened this portal, including Atlantis, and close this dark portal. And so this is what he does. I mean, this is crazy, you know. Now you think about this. Who has in the Sumerian account, who was designated as the Lord of the Waters? That was Enki. So the fact that he raised up this water from the deep and caused this flood, is quite telling. And now you see that it was done against these dark forces. It wasn't truly designed to punish mankind, as was told in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is why they knew it was coming, is because they generated it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it caused major storms and all kinds of problems when they did this. Well, when this happened, right after Atlantis was destroyed, apparently only the island of Unal lay there, and its temple was still there. And Thoth was summoned by the Dweller, which was really amazing. He goes in there and basically gets his mission. It's absolutely fabulous, the telling. I'm gonna let the audiobook do the telling, but try to visualize what's going on here. It is amazing, the energy interactions he's having that then transform him into an eternal being. So this is where it happens. So then once that happens, this Dweller takes some of the survivors of Atlantis, according to them, takes all the records that they can get, including several weapons and magic instruments that belong to Thoth, and he tells them to take all this stuff based on this new mission that he signed up to be the teacher of men. And this Dweller tells him, yeah, well, you're going to be on call, and you're going to be the light that shines through the darkness through all the ages that are to come, until a time when it's time for man to achieve light. Mm-hmm. So it's really kind of very prophetic. So he talks about leaving Atlantis, getting in the ship, flying with his crew eastward in the morning, arriving in Egypt, and it gets pretty interesting from there. And talking about putting his aircraft beneath a rock and then building the Sphinx on top of it with the lion body and the head of a man, which is his, along with the Giza pyramid. And it's actually just absolutely amazing. And then it gets even better. He doesn't just hide it. He gives you kind of an Indiana Jones scavenger hunt set of clues to go and find them and use them. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of amazing.
You know, when you look at the ancient Egyptian text, Gerald, and the Book of the Dead, the Book of the Duat, the Pyramid text, and you know, they want to become a star. They want to transcend and go to the stars, and when they die, and it's and the weighing of the heart against the feather of truth, and purgatory, and going through all these different gates, like in the Book of the Dead, and it's incredible that sophisticated knowledge they have of journeying from the afterlife. Even how they mummified the dead, the science of that alone is incredible. But all of this lineage that they have is in fact a lineage that comes from deep antiquity. It doesn't just arrive overnight, Gerald. How long?
Well, now you realize that all this knowledge that landed in Egypt came from the first alchemist, Thoth, who brought it there.
Exactly.
And was Thoth the Atlantean.
Exactly.
So the fact that you know his name was Thoth in Atlantis, and his name was Thoth, the god of wisdom and knowledge in Egypt, you know, that's...
How long, just the question...
Even a name change, it's exactly the same name.
The question is, Gerald, I mean, if you didn't have this story of Thoth the Atlantean, what we're talking about today, and you just remove that from the equation, I mean, how long would it take an Egyptian civilization to come up with this philosophy of the afterlife? I mean, it's so sophisticated and so detailed.
Well, it's not just the afterlife. It has to do with the law of continuous creation, which they were masters of. The Egyptians knew the law of continuous creation of matter. You know, matter turns into energy and then turns back into matter. Well, that's what we're saying with this light encoding of the reality matrix, that the creator of all clearly has that capability. Some of these beings who have the power of Yolton have it. We've seen some Tibetan monks and Buddhist monks that have demonstrated it, whether you believe it or not.
Do you think about the mummification process, Gerald, in terms of, look, I mean, you've got ancient Egypt, Peru, you've got the Tarim Basin in China, with these Celtic-looking, blonde-haired, big-nosed, tall people that were mummified as well. But this mummification all around the globe, even in Tenerife, I believe, as well. But do you think that they were preserving the physical body so that that matter is kept intact as best as it can, so that perhaps when they go back into the next part of their journey into the afterlife, that they remember who they are because the physical body is still intact, it doesn't decay?
Well, that's probably the belief, but from what I've now analyzed, and you'll see this later when Thoth gives you lessons about the end of your life and what to do and so on and so forth, he doesn't treat the body that way. He treats it as a simple instantiation of a meat modem that is transient, that can be replaced. Mm-hmm. So the idea of trying to preserve the body, come back and use it, take all the artifacts with you into another dimension, I think that's just a lot of misunderstanding.
Well, no, not necessarily that, Gerald, but the fact that the body is preserved in its physical form.
Yeah, well, it doesn't go with you into another dimension. So the idea that it would potentially be reoccupied if you came back.
No, not necessarily reoccupied. Perhaps that it's still in its same physical shape or physical form, and it doesn't decay into nothing. That it's still there. Perhaps there's a remembering process. Maybe you don't have the full skill set to do this, like we're talking, Gerald. Maybe it's easier to remember who you are if your physical body is still intact.
Well, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but there actually is direct discussion of that and the process that Thoth instructs you through a procedure, like he does like a scientist in a lot of other ways. He tells you exactly what to do to preserve your consciousness at death, so that if you do come back into a body, that you have your full consciousness. Mm-hmm. So if you knew that, I don't think you would be trying to preserve. I don't truly understand. I think they had not truly understood the laws of continuous creation, such that they were worried about the body and the illusion of Ka. It truly is a transient thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if they were to come back, I think they could recreate a new body. Sure. So the idea of having to preserve this and I don't know. I think it's a little cargo cultish, and I think they may have been exposed to some of the Anunnaki advanced beings that were able to reincarnate in a very short period of time. They oftentimes did the dying, rising God thing, where they would die and reincarnate within 3 days, and the whole body would be reincarnated too. So maybe they got some of their ideas from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Incredible stuff, Gerald. Incredible stuff.
Okay. So now we've got this problem where Atlantis has fallen. Thoth is headed over to the land of the hairy barbarians, and he's there to, on behalf of the dweller of Unal, who I believe is Enki, to preserve the Atlantean wisdom and reassert the pathway to light for the beings that are left on the planet.
Wow. Incredible story, Gerald. I mean, this is, for me, this is nice to see the prelude to what we know. I mean, look at ancient Egypt. Look at the technology. Look at the story just emerges, and we're missing the most important part. It's like we start in the middle of the story, and here we have the prelude now, Gerald.
Yeah, well, he's giving you the whole history. He's giving it to you in his first-hand account. This is first-hand account. That's why it's so much more profound to me. You know?
Yeah.
And functionally, he says, you know, you remember back when Horus was battling with Seth over the upper and lower part of Egypt, back in the Egyptian pyramid wars, and it was mentioned that Seth was flying around in some craft, and that Horus also had a craft that was fashioned by Thoth, and because of the unique design of the craft designed by Thoth, he smote Seth. So in this end of this tablet here, Thoth says, "Hey, also by the way, I'm putting a craft beneath the Sphinx," and he's saying that in the future there's going to be some invaders come from the deep, and for those who are following the path of wisdom, and I don't quite know who he's talking about, it's probably already been done. He asks you to recover this ship and easily smite the invaders. So I thought that was like, wow, this is just crazy. So I wonder if Jim Hertog's SIWAS radar data showed a vessel underneath the Sphinx, just like he's saying here.
Well, I was describing the drilling that I have in that documentary, but the reason I have it is because Edgar Casey predicts the chamber underneath the paws of the Sphinx, and then the ARE, the Area Association for Research and Enlightenment, the Edgar Casey Foundation as it's known, then funds Zahi Hawass, probably paid for his education, and another guy as well. And then there's some that's a
very interesting story, by the way.
Yeah, and then there's some surreptitious behavior where they have financial backing for drilling, and this, I've done a few shows on it, and basically what happens is they appease everybody and make the situation go away. Yes, we drilled the Sphinx, but when you look at the video, Gerald, they drilled at such a bad angle, they wouldn't hit any chamber. They would have just drilled into solid rock. They drilled it at a very, very acute angle to miss the chamber deliberately.
Well, Thoth actually goes, hey, you know, the Sphinx and the Giza Pyramid are keystones one to the other. And then he kind of sends you into, there's a chamber in my pyramid that ends in a wall to an open hidden door. And he says, in order to open this door, that you'll need the key of the seven, right? So he's giving you these like little clues. Well, if you look at page 355 of my book, he tells you what the key of the seven is for all those people who've been sending robots in there to try and see with a camera what's at the end of this thing. I wonder if they ever opened that chamber. You know, they found a chamber like that, right?
Yeah, and there's another door behind that door, that little chamber. They drilled a hole in it.
Oh, here it is. This is probably what sent them looking for it right here. And I would tell you on page 355, I believe that is the sequence of words that is the key of the seven, because he's talking about the seven cycle masters, the 3 through 9. Right. Wow. So once you know that, then you go find whatever their key is, and that, I just told you what it was.
Wonderful stuff, Gerald. Wonderful stuff.
Anyway, so I thought that was very, very telling. And I'm not sure I have much more to add to the introduction of this tablet. I think it tells just a wonderful story by itself.
Sure. Well, if you're okay, Gerald, I'll play out the rest of the show with the Emerald Tablet number 5 if you're good to go.
I'm good to go. I think we covered some good ground today, and I'm really excited to do 6 and 7 after we do a show on Nibiru / the Anunnaki. I think it might be fun to take a little break from this and catch up on what's happening in the world.
Well, I have a lot of requests for Nibiru at the moment, and I know some good. I've got another guy. He's an astronomer guy, and there's such a frenzy on Nibiru at the moment, Gerald, and that's why I want to do a show with you. I want to.
Yeah, I've been watching it climb to a crescendo over the last 5 years.
Yeah,
and I think it would be a good time to lay out everything that we know that could be backed up tangibly and try, and if we want to make inferences, we can, but at least to have the best realistic information we can get without being the ones behind the telescopes, because, ultimately they're the ones that know.
Sure. Well, let's do that, Gerald. We'll come back for a Nibiru special for the next show and pause it for a little while, and then we'll come back to do the next tablets as well, 6 and 7. But for now, we're going to finish out the rest of the show on Emerald Tablet number 5.
Okay, sounds great.
Oft dream I of buried Atlantis, lost in the ages that have passed into night. Eon on eon thou existed in beauty, a light shining through the darkness of night. Mighty in power, ruling the earthborn, Lord of the earth in Atlantis' day. King of the nations, master of wisdom, light through suntel, keeper of the way. Dwelt in his temple the master of Unal, light of the earth in Atlantis' day. Master he from a cycle beyond us, living in bodies as one among men. Not as earthborn he from beyond us, son of a cycle advanced beyond men. Know ye, O man, that Horloth the master was never one with the children of men. Far in the past, when Atlantis first grew as a power, appeared there one with the key of wisdom, showing the way of light to all. Showed he to all men the path of attainment, the way of the light that flows among men. Mastering darkness, leading the man-soul upward to heights that were one with the light. Divided the kingdoms he into sections, 10 were they, ruled by children of men. Upon another he built a temple, built but not by the children of men. Out of the ether he called its substance, molded and formed by the power of Yolton. Into the forms he built with his mind. Mile upon mile it covered the island, space upon space it grew in its might. Black, yet not black, but dark like the space-time, deep in its heart the essence of light. Swiftly the temple grew into being, molded and shaped by the word of the dweller, called from the formless into a form. Builded he then with it great chambers, filled them with forms called forth from the ether, filled them with wisdom called forth from his mind. Formless was he within his temple, yet he was formed in the image of men. Dwelling among them, yet not of them, strange and far different was he from the children of men. Chose he then among the people 3 who became his gateway. Choose he the 3 from the highest to become his links with Atlantis. Messengers they who carried his counsel to the kings of the children of men. Brought he forth others and taught them wisdom, teachers they to the children of men. Placed he them on the island of Undal to stand as teachers of light to men. Each of those who were thus chosen, taught must he be for 5 years and 10. Only thus could he have understanding to bring the light to the children of men. Thus there came into being the temple, a dwelling place for the master of men. I, Thoth, have ever sought wisdom, searching in darkness and searching in light. Long in my youth I traveled the pathway, seeking ever new knowledge to gain, until after much striving one of the 3 to me brought the light. Brought he to me the commands of the dweller, called me from the darkness into the light. Brought he me before the dweller, deep in the temple before the great fire. There on the great throne beheld I the dweller, clothed with the light and flashing with fire. Down I knelt before that great wisdom, feeling the light flowing through me in waves. Heard I then the voice of the dweller, O darkness, come into the light. Long have ye sought the pathway to light. Each soul on earth that loosens its fetters shall soon be made free from the bondage of night. Forth from the darkness have ye risen, closer approached the light of your goal. Here ye shall dwell as one of my children, keeper of records gathered by wisdom, instrument thou of the light from beyond. Ready by thou made to do what is needed, preserver of wisdom through the ages of darkness, that thou shalt come fast on the children of men. Live thee here and drink of all wisdom, secrets and mysteries unto thee shall unveil. Then answered I, the master of cycles, saying, O light that descended to men, give thou to me of thy wisdom, that I might be a teacher of men. Give thou of thy light, that I may be free. Spoke then to me again the master, Age after age shall ye live through your wisdom. I, when o'er Atlantis the ocean waves roll, holding the light through hidden in darkness, ready to come whenever thou shalt call. Go thee now and learn greater wisdom, grow thou through light to infinities all. Long then dwelt I in the temple of the dweller, until at last I was one with the light. Followed I then the path to the star plains, followed I then the pathway to light. Deep into earth's heart I followed the pathway, learning the secrets below as above, learning the pathway to the halls of Amente, learning the law that balances the world. To earth's hidden chamber pierced I by my wisdom, deep through the earth's crust into the pathway, hidden for ages from the children of men. Unveiled before me ever more wisdom, until I reached the new knowledge, found that all is part of an all, great and yet greater than all that we know. Searched I infinity's heart through all the ages, deep and yet deeper more mysteries I found. Now as I look back through the ages, know I that wisdom is boundless, ever grown deeper throughout the ages, one with infinities greater than all. Light there was in ancient Atlantis, yet darkness too was hidden in all. Fell from the light into the darkness some who had risen to heights among men. Proud they became because of their knowledge, proud they were of their place among men. Deep delved they into the forbidden, opened the gateway that led to below. Sought they to gain ever more knowledge, but seeking to bring it up from below. He who descends below must have balance, else he is bound by lack of our light. Opened they then by their knowledge pathways forbidden to man. But in his temple all-seeing the dweller lay in his aguante, while through Atlantis his soul roamed free. Saw he the Atlanteans, by their magic, open the gateway that would bring to earth a great woe. Fast fled his soul then, back to his body, up he arose from his aguante. Called he the three mighty messengers, gave the commands that shattered the world. Deep neath earth's crust to the halls of Amente, swiftly descended the dweller. Called he then on the powers of the seven lords wielded, changed the earth's balance. Down sank Atlantis beneath the dark waves, shattered the gateway that had been opened, shattered the doorway that had led down below. All of the islands were shattered except Unal, and part of the island of the sons of the dweller. Preserved he them to be teachers, light on the path for those to come after, light for the lesser children of men. Called he then, I Thoth before him, gave me commands for all I should do, saying, Take thou of Thoth all of your wisdom, take all your records, take all your magic. Go thou forth as a teacher of men, go thou forth reserving the records, until in time light grows among men. Light shall thou be all through the ages, hidden yet found by enlightened men. Over all earth give we ye power, free thou to give or take it away. Gather now the sons of Atlantis, take them and flee to the people of the rock caves. Fly to the land of the children of Chem. Then gathered I the sons of Atlantis. Into the spaceship I brought all my records. Brought the records of sunken Atlantis. Gathered I all my power instruments, many of mighty magic. Up then we rose on wings of the morning. High we rose above the temple, leaving behind the three and the dweller, deep in the halls neath the temple, closing the pathways to the lords of the cycles. Yet ever to him who has knowing, open shall be the path to Amente. Fast fled we then on the wings of the morning, fled to the land of the children of Chem. There by my power I conquered and ruled them, raised I to light the children of Chem. Deep 'neath the rock I buried my spaceship, waiting the time when man might be free. Over the spaceship erected a marker in the form of a lion, yet like unto man. There 'neath the image rest ye my spaceship, forth to be brought when the need shall arise. Know ye, O man, that far in the future invaders shall come from out of the deep. Then awake ye who have wisdom, bring forth my ship and conquer with ease. Deep 'neath the image lies my secret, search and find in the pyramid I build. Each to the other is the keystone, each the gateway that leads into life. Follow the key I leave behind me, seek in the doorway till life shall be thine. Seek thou in my pyramid, deep in the passage that ends in a wall. Use thou the key of the seven, and open thee the pathway will fall. Now unto thee I have given my wisdom, now unto thee I have given my way. Follow the pathway, solve thou my secrets, unto thee I have shown the way.
He brought them the knowledge and wisdom and how to get their souls on the pathway back to their light source, because he explained to them they were from this sun soul spirit just like we are. And Horlet is described as beyond Earth cycle. He wasn't from Earth, and he was claimed to have never been one with the children of men, although he was living in a body as a man among them as an avatar. So that's kind of trippy right there.
Wow.
Right? So this Horlet guy chooses 3 disciples on Atlantis to train for 15 years as light bearers and teachers to the rest of mankind. And they live on this island of Unal. And actually, one place it's spelled Unal, and the other place it's spelled Undal. And I got a little confused in my book. I don't know which is the right one. So Horlet, this master Horlet, has the power of what's called Yolton, Lytolan. Now, this is the power to manifest matter with his mind that we were talking about in the light encoding reality of the matrix rules. Okay? And I'm dying to share that, but I'm going to hold it out as a teaser. Okay? But if you study those rules, you could have the power of Yolton. That's what he's telling you here. Okay? So this guy is pretty powerful. And he chooses these 3 disciples, trains them for 15 years, sticks them out on this island, and then he segregates Atlantis into 10 sections with 10 rulers. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, wait a second, where have I seen that before? And I'm going to jump forward.
And are you back with me, Gerald?
I sure am, buddy. How do you hear me?
Oh, I hear you loud and clear. Wow, this is incredible stuff, Gerald. We're getting into some really deep details. Enki's going to make an appearance here, and Enlil as well. I love this analogy. Lord of the earth, Lord of the air, and how this all fits in with the dweller of Unal. Just jump in there, Gerald. Let's go for it.
Okay. Well, in this tablet, the dweller of Unal, Thoth introduces us to this heritage that leads up to the dweller of Atlantis, that goes through, and he calls him an Atlantean king, whose lineage comes through Suntal. And I made him a little mistake in the book. I thought he was talking about Suntal being the Atlantean king, so a little correction there. He calls himself the master of Unal, and he's an avatar, just like the other avatars we talked about in the last tablet, that could occupy the bodies of men. His name is Horlet, and he's declared to be the Lord of the Earth at Atlantis' day. So I heard that, I was like, wait a second. Lord of the Earth, EN means brings us to right now, and changing over from Pisces to Aquarius. Mm-hmm. We're the first degree of Aquarius, from my calculations. And that means it's Anunnaki council change time. So all these perturbations you're seeing in the simulator, the wars and everything else, this happens between the power changes especially when it's going from an Enkiite or an Enelite who's bent on destruction to a more benevolent ruler like one of the kids of Enki or Enki himself that, wants the best for mankind, wants them to evolve, wants them to wake up in the simulator. And, you're going to see that in this tablet that, Thoth is, and he said it at the end of the last tablet, he viewed himself as the freer of mankind out of bondage of the illusion of Ka. So, so he felt like he was an intercessor. And as far as I'm concerned, the fact that he stepped up, could have taken many other paths and decided to do that for us, that makes him a hero in my book.
Wow. Just think astrological houses, clashes or interactions and stuff like that, but think of it on a grand scale for the change of zodiacal ages. Just think of that on a grand scale. It's the play.
Well, this Horlet guy is amazing. I'll tell you a few of his attributes. And I personally think it's an avatar of Enki himself, because there was only one god in the Atlantean temple, and that was Enki, or Poseidon, who was Enki. So this Horlet shows up, according to the story, early when the Atlanteans were first coming to power. And Lord, and Ki is the Sumerian word for earth, so Enki means Lord of the Earth. And that was his title before his half-brother showed up, Enlil, who means Lord, N-E-N.L-I-L means Lord of the Air. So he didn't arrive for another 5,000 years after Enki was here and was already the Lord of the Earth. So this, in my opinion, was the beginning. If it didn't already go back to Nibiru before, it was the beginning of a major functional overlapping between those two that caused this battle for the title of Lord of the Earth. And that, by the way, is rank 50 on the Anunnaki Council. And Enki's rank at one point in history prior to 3760 was 40 and Enlil's was 50. So he actually was the Lord of the Air, but he also was taking over the Lord of the Earth. That's why Enki got pushed out to be the Lord of the Waters, right?
Wow. This sounds like something out of a Star Wars movie, Gerald. Lord of the Earth, Battle for the Earth, Lord of the Year, Lord of Scott.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I know. So, eventually through my writings, I started stacking them into the Enkiite and Enlilite camp, because oftentimes these disparities occurred even among their children over whether they were in the right place in the zodiacal house to assert themselves as the new zodiacal ruler. And this brought into my whole theory about the ping-ponging back and forth between the Enkiites and the Enlilites, and the extent to which the zodiacal house was their term limits, which, just a little bit from the text, from the Critias dialogue.
Plato.
Yeah, where Plato is talking about how Atlantis is segregated, that there were some kingly actors on this Atlantean stage that came out of my other book. So we know that Poseidon and Enki had 5 pairs of sons, 10 total, who became the kings and rulers of Atlantis. And the eldest one was Atlas, the son of Poseidon and Cleito. Okay, so basically what that comes down to is these offspring, because Cleito was a primitive worker. She was not Anunnaki bloodline. So these offspring are demigods, and in the tablets, Horlet apparently segregates Atlantis into 10 sections with 10 rulers, and he describes them as being ruled by the children of men. So these offspring of Enki with Cleito actually are, closer to men than they are to Anunnaki. So I thought that was interesting that those two correlated, those stories. Okay? So this Horlet builds his own temple, and he describes it as mile upon mile, you'll hear this in the reading later, of buildings, using this mind power of Yolton that he has to create material forms, both animate and inanimate, but primarily focused on the cities and the dwellings that he's building with his mind. So that's kind of amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, well, this shows up as something that apparently You know, if Thoth gets taught this